So, welcome everyone to this workshop on youth resilience, youth power, and youth development for a sustainable future. My name is Frida Delberg, and I will be the moderator for this workshop. I am currently working at an NGO called Fritidsforum in Sweden, and as a project manager. And I work with different projects where the focus mainly is to empower youth and give them tools to make their own voices heard, and also encourage them to follow their dreams. Hi, welcome. I am also, please sit down. I am also a board member of the IFS, which is the International Federation of Settlement Houses and Neighborhood Centers. And we actually have two more board members in the audience today, Bobby Nassar and Irma Rodriguez. Wave your hand. So IFS, International Federation of Settlement and Neighborhood Centers. The movement of settlement houses and neighborhood centers started in 1880s, and today it's just as vibrant and relevant as it was back then, but it has many names today. So I'm going to tell you briefly on what neighborhood houses do. So we are often in neighborhoods where people have great suffering and problems, but we see people as the strengths they bring, not the problems that they are experiencing. Also, the whole community is working together. That means institutions, community-based organizations and institutions have to talk. Schools have to talk. The government have to talk. And social workers talk to families. So when the neighborhood is strong, people can grow up strong. And our work is about social justice, not just putting a band-aid on a problem. We do deal with crisis and immediate needs, and there's no judgment about that. But we always try to remind ourselves, where does this problem come from? And what is the inequity that probably caused this problem? And let's look at the social issues that caused this problem, not to look at the person who is suffering as the cause of the problem. So that's a social justice perspective. And almost every settlement has multiple age group, disciplines, and multiple kinds of activities. Because no person is the same as another person, and no one's journey is the same. Every journey is unique. So we're all very comprehensive and multiple in what we do. IFS brings us all together. We all believe in these things. We believe that that's the right way to develop a community, and it's all about human rights. Each community and country that we are part of is ultimately about human rights, which is why we are connected to the UN. And today, with us in the panel, we have representatives from different NGOs and countries. And the first speaker today, they will present themselves. That's how we have planned this. So today we will start with Michelle. The word is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Michelle Mills, and I have the honor and the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of St. Stephen's Community House, located in Columbus, Ohio. And I also have the honor and the privilege of serving as the Vice President of North America for the International Federation of Settlement Houses. St. Stephen's Community House is located in the Midwest, and our attempt to serve families from a strength-based, family-focused model is as old as the idea of settlement houses in this country. We serve as young as 6 weeks to as old as 98. Our goal and tagline is to brighten lives. And the reason why we look at brighten lives is because we don't self-determine for other people their destiny and or their journey, as you heard when Frida talked about it. It is about what is brighter for them is the determination. And so how a family or individual presents themselves to us is where we start, and where we go is completely up to that individual and or family. And so we operate from a strength-based model of who people are when they present to us. We are an NGO and a member of IFS, and come together to learn from you and from all of our members that you see sitting here the best way to drive human rights and human equality across the world. And so with that, I want to present to you one of the basic needs that every individual in this entire world should have, and that is the ability to feed themselves and their family. And so Project Aquastar that I'll present to you is an urban farm that we've started in Linden, a community that is plagued with poverty, poor education, poor nutrition, health habits, and other inequities that exist in our community. And the Linden neighborhood is the title of the neighborhood within Columbus, Ohio, that St. Stephen's Community House serves. Project Aquastar was our way of not only putting in the hands of the individuals, families, and particularly the youth, the ability to control their own food consumption and also for economic viability. And so our urban farm is there to not only grow and increase the level of nutrition and access to healthy food, but to also give families an opportunity to sustain themselves. And so we started a farm with young people and the idea of aquaponics, which is the symbiotic relationship between fish, their waste, and vegetation. Using aquaponics and also organic growing, using compost, food waste that some people may take for granted, we're using it into compost to recycling. That entire lesson of where food starts and where it ends is a lesson that we teach our young people about humanity. There's a start and an end, and that complete cycle of how that happens is their responsibility. I think many of you understand the work of grassroots NGOs to know that we hope in a few years we will not be facing these same problems. The only way to do that, as you'll hear from my other colleagues, is through the youth themselves. They have to be engaged in not only identifying the troubles in their community, but being a part of the solutions. If they are not a part of solutions, we will repeat the same things that we're focused during this conference to address. And so Project Aquastar starts with the youth, and it ends with the youth, and they're feeding their next generation to eradicate hunger in their own community. If we don't engage them in the solutions, we will repeat these same problems. And so the youth designed the aquaponic structure, the greenhouse, the hoop house, the entire layout of the urban farm. They are responsible for measuring the consumption of the food, how much food is produced, and how to better produce it for the health of their own community. So they weigh how much produce goes out to the community so they can take the ownership and feel empowered about erasing a social issue in their own community. So they can say, I grew, I harvested, and I distribute healthy food to my community. And they themselves can take pride in the fact that no one in their community, their direct neighbor, the person across the street, is going to bed hungry. That is their job. It is their responsibility to improve the world better than the way that you and I are handing it to them. We want them to hand over a world that is better than the one that we're handing them. And it has to start with your basic needs, and that is hunger. And if someone can control what they consume, he, she, and their family can control their destiny. What we consume is who we are. I won't read you the presentation that I handed out to you because I'm sure you can read that on your own. But I will tell you that the answer, and one of the things that we have to drive, is food justice. Because if we don't drive what we eat, we won't be able to drive anything else. And once a young person understands their ability to control their basic needs, they then move on to controlling their health care. They then move on to controlling their education. They then move on to controlling their housing. They then move on to controlling crime. And they then become lawmakers. My secret identity is a lawmaker in Columbus, Ohio. I actually serve on our Columbus City Council. That's my secret identity. And so I understand the cycle of creating and working in programs and moving from program work to policy work. That is a necessity. That, I will tell you, as an NGO, is your responsibility. NGOs have to begin to engage in policy and driving policy themselves. No one knows it better than we do. If we continue to just operate in programs and not make great changes and strides in policy, we'll continue to spin and spin. And that's what we don't want for our young people, so we have to be that example. We have to command the agenda, and we have to drive the agenda, or we'll always be on the end of the agenda. So the results of what people write out become our problems and the things that we have to work on. It is important that we begin to write the script, write the agenda, the policies. That is the main reason and the only reason as to why I would subject myself to a campaign. It's not easy. But facing those who don't quite understand the boots on the ground work that we are doing across this globe, just going to provide testimony and meeting them in parliament centers and in city halls across this world is effective. Continue to advocate, but we have to not only go in the room to have a conversation, we have to lead the conversation when we're in the room. And that's the example Aquastar leads for our young people. Instead of talking about people being hungry, we want them to be a part of the solution. We really believe that Project Aquastar will have a global impact because it is about empowering people from their very basic need to their basic rights. Basic needs become basic rights. It can't just be what we feel people need, it has to be their right. Their right to healthy food, their right to determine where they live, their right to adequate education. And when you move from needs, they become what people understand to be their right. And they'll demand access. Access is not the only answer. It's not just about people having avocados or healthier pieces of food to eat. It's about it becoming their sense of determining what is their right to have. And so we believe that through Project Aquastar and farm raising fish and organic vegetation, that is just the beginning of empowering our young people into changing the course of action that we see much more important: housing, education, and their safety, which are all basic rights as opposed to basic needs. And so that's the agenda we hope to set with Project Aquastar. We started with about 5 to 7 young women, actually, that we're trying to introduce into engineering and agricultural careers. And those 5 young women designed aquaponic structure that then was entered into our state fair, and they went on and on. But they wanted something bigger, and they wanted us to bring it to scale. And that's exactly what we did. Just like you'll hear from my colleagues, our ideas and our solutions come from the people that we serve. It is not our ideas, it is not research. Yes, we use it, but we take the lead from our residents and the people that we serve. That is also who we are accountable to, the people that we serve. You'll hear that motto across the world because we share how to make that work in a variety of communities, whether it's a city community, urban environment, or rural environment. The idea and the concept of listening to the people that you serve is what you'll hear from my colleagues from across the world, making a difference and putting the power in the hands of the people that we serve. So I urge you all who are a part of an NGO to drive the agenda. The example Aquastar is just one, but I do believe that food justice is the way. We will outpopulate our food source within 20 years. Population growth at its current speed is not keeping up with food production. Our environment makes it difficult for farmers to grow in the healthiest manner, which is going to impact how we all eat. The more we populate this country and the greater the challenges in food production, will leave more people hungry than we have now. The rate of food produced, the amount of time it takes for food to travel to your table is a challenge, and it'll become a greater challenge for all of us. Urban farming, an increase in agriculture, and people controlling how and what they grow is the only way to address hunger. We have a food production and population that is going to collide within the next 20 years. We have to begin controlling that. If we cannot control what people eat, what they sustain, we cannot sustain. And so we talk about sustainability in communities. You have to start with food and their basic needs and understanding what is a basic need and what should be a basic right. And when you start with food, I guarantee you that action agenda will quickly develop from just food to education and housing.
Michelle?
And my time.
Yeah,
All right, I'm wrapping up. Thank you all for coming. If you have any further questions, please visit our website. I am very proud to represent St. Stephen's Community House and also the International Federation of Settlements. I'm sure you enjoy hearing from my fellow colleagues. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Michelle. There will be time for Q&A in the end of the workshop, so you know. Save your questions. Melissa's going to pass around sheets. What do you call it?
A sign-in sheet.
A sign-in
So
sheet.
If you want to
So-
be in touch with us about any of the projects you hear, or receive copies of the presentations, or just learn more about IFS, we'd love to have your contact information.
Thank you.
Start one on each end.
So
Turn
we're
the
just-
page over if you run out of room.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. We're gonna go to the next speaker. Our second speaker is Wilson. Wilson, you're welcome. The word is yours.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning to everyone.
Pues voy a hablar un poco de lo que hace mi organización.
I'm going to speak about what my organization does.
Nosotros creemos que todas las acciones que se hacen
We believe that all the actions that we do
para poder mermar todos los problemas sociales que suceden principalmente con los jóvenes
in order to diminish the problems primarily in young people
son estructurales.
are structural problems.
Por eso que nosotros paralelamente al trabajo que hacemos con la juventud y solventar los problemas también hacemos mucha incidencia política.
Parallel to the work that we do with the young people, we also have incidents in the political area.
Podemos ver que de entre los problemas sociales los más afectados son los grupos étnicos y los grupos afrodescendientes.
We see that the groups that are mainly affected are the ones descending from African Americans.
Por eso que el mundo entero se ha dado cuenta de eso y se han venido corrigiendo esas inequidades políticamente.
The whole world is aware of that, and that's why a lot of advances are working in that way.
Desde la tercera conferencia mundial contra el racismo en Durban, Sudáfrica, el 2001.
Since the third
Tercera conferencia mundial contra el racismo.
Third global conference in Durban against racism.
Sí, donde manda a los países a crear políticas públicas de acciones afirmativas.
Where the mandate was to create affirmative action in order to correct this problem.
Cuando usted va a ver, cuando va a las cárceles, por ejemplo, a los centros de detención juvenil, casi en todo el mundo la mayor presencia es de afrodescendientes.
When you visit juvenile centers, the main population is young people from African descent.
En nuestro país en ese sentido hemos en los últimos 4 periodos presidenciales
In the last 4 presidential periods in Honduras,
hemos hecho firmar compromisos de campaña a los candidatos a presidentes.
we've made the candidates sign agreements with us.
Y eso se convierte en un documento, un instrumento de incidencia política.
And that becomes an instrument that helps us later on to make sure that things can happen.
También esa práctica la hemos ido expandiendo con países amigos como Costa Rica. Recientemente Costa Rica firmó un compromiso de campaña con los pueblos indígenas y afrodescendientes.
We have expanded that practice, and in Costa Rica this already happened too, and they signed some agreements with ethnic groups.
A raíz de esas firmas de compromiso de campaña gestionamos la creación de un ministerio del gobierno que atiende exclusivamente a los pueblos indígenas y afrodescendientes.
Through the signing of this agreement, we were able to get the creation of a ministry dedicated to defending the rights of these ethnic groups.
Fue el primer ministerio en el país que surge desde la sociedad civil con participación de toda la comunidad para ver qué es lo que iba a hacer el ministerio y todo lo que iba a componer el ministerio.
This was the first ministry that had incidents from the civil society to see how it would work.
También se creó el mes de la herencia africana, un decreto ley.
Oh, by law, we got this decree of African heritage passed through.
Y así se han creado varias leyes que favorecen y visibilizan a la comunidad afrodescendiente.
Through the creation of these laws and agreements, we have made the community more visible to the whole society.
También en materia de política, el 2011 creemos nosotros que fue un avance significativo de visibilización para la comunidad afrodescendiente.
In 2000 particularly, this was a year that helped us become more visible.
El 2011 fue el año declarado por la ONU, el Año Internacional de los Afrodescendientes.
The UN decreed that this was the year for African descendants.
Y también en ese marco, como organización nos atrevimos a lanzar la primera cumbre mundial de afrodescendientes.
In that year, we also launched the first summit of African descendants.
Evento que tuvo lugar del 18 al 21 de agosto en Honduras.
We did it on August 18th through the 21st in Honduras.
Participaron 1.300 delegados de 43 países y 4 continentes.
We had 1,300 delegates coming from 43 countries and 4 continents.
Y fue reconocida por la ONU en la resolución A, pleca 66, pleca 460.
And the UN acknowledged it through the resolution A66460.
Uno de los principales de la declaración y el plan de acción, unos 3 principales objetivos: la creación del Fondo de Desarrollo para los Afrodescendientes del Mundo, proclamación del Decenio Internacional de los Afrodescendientes y la creación de foros permanentes de asuntos afrodescendientes en todos los organismos internacionales.
And the 3 main agreements were the creation of a development fund for African descendants, the proclamation of an international decade of African descendants, and the creation of permanent forums for African descendants in all the international and regional departments.
Recientemente la ONU, en su resolución A68237, proclamó el decenio de las personas afrodescendientes, que iniciará el 1 de enero del 2015 y finaliza el 31 de diciembre del 2024.
Beginning January 1st, the UN adopted the resolution 68237 proclaiming the decade of African descendants, and it will begin January 1st and end December 31st on 2024.
Entonces lo que hacemos es creamos las condiciones políticas para que todas esas inequidades se puedan ir disminuyendo.
We first tried to create the policy so that all these inequalities can be later on corrected.
Pero también estamos haciendo trabajo directamente con la comunidad, ya con los problemas que están ahora.
And we're also working directly with the community with the problems we face each day.
Por ejemplo, tenemos una escuela de formación de líderes afrodescendientes en derechos humanos.
For example, we have this school, a training for leaders African descendants on human rights.
Pero en esa escuela no solo es para afrodescendientes. El nombre es así, pero no solo es para afrodescendientes.
This is the name of the school, but it's not only for African descendants, but for other people as well.
De esa escuela se han graduado más de 800 personas, principalmente jóvenes.
We have graduated already 800 leaders, mainly young people.
Y no solo de Honduras, sino que de México, Guatemala, Belice, Argentina, Costa Rica, Nicaragua y Perú.
Okay, so young people from all these countries, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, Argentina, Belice, Costa Rica, Nicaragua y Perú.
Y también le estamos apostando ahora estamos en un proyecto que se va a llamar Universidad Afrodescendiente de las Américas.
And we're working on this project, which is to create a university called University of African Descendants in the Americas.
Ya que hay más de 200 millones de personas en las Américas que son afrodescendientes y enfrentan severas condiciones de pobreza, extrema pobreza, como resultado la exclusión y la marginalización de los gobiernos.
Because we currently have 200 million people in the Americas that are African descendants and are facing exclusion and exclusion.
I have to ask you to wrap it up and say some final thing.
¿Qué tienes que cerrar?
Ok. Solo para cerrar, creemos que una de las cosas es la educación que va a sacar adelante a los pueblos.
We believe that education is what's going to get our countries out of this.
Hay muchas cosas que hablar, pero el tiempo es muy corto.
There are many things I want to say, but maybe it's short.
Muchas gracias por la atención.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, if you have a lot of questions, do please keep them, remember them, write them down, because we will stay in the room for a while after the workshop as well. So the next speakers are actually a pair, two speakers, but that is Johan and Marva sitting in the middle, but I will give the word first to Johan.
Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Johan Lindgren and I come from Sweden. I work as a lawyer, but I'm here to be a member, or I'm a board member of an organization that is named Fritidsforum. And Fritidsforum means Free Time Forum in Swedish. I would like to focus on three things today on this short time, and I will talk about Fritidsforum, of course. I will stress the importance of democratic meeting places, and also last I will talk about why we support youth to create their own NGOs. So, and then Marva will help me to talk about more grassroots level of the democracy work we do. So what is Fritidsforum? Fritidsforum is a non-profit, non-governmental national organization in Sweden that was created in 1937. In the beginning it was a settlement movement and organization, but today it has organized itself to be a youth organization with members all over Sweden. Fritidsforum could actually be described as an umbrella organization for youth organization and youth centers in Sweden, and we also have collaborations internationally. That's why we're here. And the agenda of Fritidsforum is to empower young persons to build resilience and support democratic meeting places. We do that by providing education, networking and tools for youth projects. And Fritidsforum as an organization is actually represented in the Swedish Youth Ministers' Youth Council on Politics. And we have also been a part of the drafting of a new proposal of a new law regarding youth policy in Sweden. So now I have bragged enough, I think. So question 2, why is meeting places important? Well, except for the fundamental reasons that my colleagues here will explain and already have explained, I must say it's crucial because of the democratic point of view. There has actually been a lot of riots in Sweden like around the world, the youth are making a revolution. In Sweden, there has been a lot of burning cars. There have been violence towards the police and destruction, mostly in our suburbs with a high percentage of immigrants. But people in all ages are actually being upset and feeling neglected by the government and the decision makers. And in many areas there has in fact become a big gap between the youth and persons with formal power. And what we as an organization see is that the decision makers and the youth, they don't have a dialogue. They don't have a dialogue. Today many politicians, they believe that they know what is best for the youth without talking to them. And of course the youth is very upset of this. So what we have seen is that a key for making young persons heard is through organizing them or helping them to organize themselves. However, that's interesting. When the young persons organizing themselves, the young persons often realizes that they don't need the politicians. They don't need the decision makers. The young person instead takes the control of her or his own life through empowerment. They learn how to do it yourself, DIY, and that is self-determination. And also I would like you to remember that the first thing a dictator do when in power is to close the meeting places for people. You can see this around the world today actually, how the dictators are closing internet so people will not be able to discuss. And that is something the decision makers have to think about and consider when not funding our important youth projects. Now, the last question. Why do we give young people the opportunity to create their own NGO? Well, we as an organization, we meet a lot of young people, different backgrounds and different preconditions. However, we feel that it's not important where you come from. What is important is where you're going. So at our youth centers, we ask the young person, what is your interest? What do you want to do? And from there, 30 seconds. Yeah, thank you though. And from there we guide them in how they can meet other like-minded, organize themselves, and how they can make dreams come true. And we help them to create their own NGO, and we actually have 4 steps how to create their NGO. And I would love to talk more about this another time. But actually, it's all about empowering and to make young people empower the power and to make change in their own life and also other people's life, because they do. So that's what I'm going to say, and now I hand it over to Marwa.
Such a good speech. Thank you so much. Okay, I will talk a little bit more about the micro level, how we work in Sweden. And like Johan said before, Sweden tackles with a lot of young people who are less able to influence their lives and have little room for influence in society. That is a big problem. In particular, the young people growing up in socioeconomic disadvantaged communities. That is something that I think the whole world has in common. This is given a need for young people to make the voices heard, to raise the voices. Okay, so let's see how we make that work in Sweden. I think that building networks is something that is a great method to use when you're working with young people. So I'm going to tell you a little fast about a project that is called P. That is, I'm going to call it passion and inclusion, which means that what you love is included in this project, okay? And that project aims to increase these young people's influences and opportunities in the local community they live in. Thanks to the possibilities that comes with networking, they're able to build networks around common interest, and by that way, hopefully, they strengthen the voices, or they raise the voices by giving them tools and methods to do so, okay? They conduct meetings and they have like local activities, taking the support of social media to organize themselves and to reach out to others about their common interests. and are also investigating opportunities to engage with young people in other countries. Empower them, that's the main goal. We know that young people who are networking also develops their abilities, their social skills, the contacts with others, and also increases the chances of getting a job in the near future. But this does put some great expectations on today's youth leaders and who work at the youth clubs or the youth centers on their local community. But I can talk about that some other time. It's okay. So let us talk about the good stuff instead. What is the successful outcomes from this? I already talked a little bit more about it before, but let us talk about the great stories that I have from this project and how these young people have made themselves important in the local community by helping others to succeed. We have a kind of big minority in Sweden, that the Roman community, and we have some guys, they're between 14 and 16 years old, who are breakdancing, and they call themselves breaking stars. And their main goal is to show the community that we can dance, and that is that one thing that is more important than where I come from, okay? We gave them tools and methods. They did that too, but we had another project that is called Young Leading Young. I will tell you more about that later too after the workshop if you're interested. That give the tools how to organize themselves. So the funny thing about this, the word spread out fast in the local community that there were like 6 guys between 14 and 16 years old who knew how to organize themselves. So there were a lot of parents who thought that, oh my God, I want to start a new business. I should probably go to those guys and ask them how I'm supposed to do that. So their interests are, the interests were the main goal. And we're talking about young people in the ages of 14 to 16 years old that somehow had a great root in their community. That is interesting. The project provides the young people the opportunity to organize themselves. I already said that, to take responsibility for activities and then develop of democratic decision-making methods. In this stage, there's 3 youth organizations that is included in the project, and they have the common interest that they have is dance, film, and how to learn methods in order to reach higher goals, but also about discrimination and how is to be a minority in today's Sweden. So last, yeah, I knew that. I had a feeling about that. So why do we do this? I just want to say that we believe that young people build up confidence in the society they live in by showing them that things are possible if you're willing to go for it. They also create conditions and understandings of how to seek support for their own ideas, maybe in the local neighborhood, youth club, or in society in general. But I just want to say one last thing is that we know that a common interest is a successful way to build bridges and create opportunities to meet regardless of differences, like social, culture, ethnical. We feel that it's better to promote the similarities than the common interest instead of pressing differences. We argue that it's society's duty to make people feel included, and one way of achieving that could be by seeing each other's strengths and promote them. A shared interest can be a good start to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan and Marwa. So I will pass the word to our next speaker, Jamal.
Thank you, Frida. I may have a little extra time, so we can do what we want, because I'm going to try to make it actually a little bit short and give more to Q&A. So my name is Jamal Siraj. I work at the Arab American Family Support Center. We're New York based. I wanted to speak today about the theme and connecting the idea of resilience to development in a sustainability context. Before I get off track, because I may be a little bit of that nature, I'll say that my overall takeaway point that I'd like us to consider as a room, all doing our work in our own countries and places, is that we really look at sustainability for a lot of individuals in every community across the world that is going through something that may be traumatic. If we don't work to address healing in a way that makes sense, I don't think development is really going to be sustainable. because any intervention that we see, economic or otherwise, has to be sustained by people who are ready to take on that duty. So a lot of the work that you've heard across all different organizations are very different. I'm gonna talk about the work our org does a little bit to contextualize it, but it's mostly going to be about some of the stuff that settlement houses, I think, do well in general, grounded in a little bit of what we do. So our organization, our NGO, was founded in 1994. We provide comprehensive social services to immigrants to help them get empowered and acclimate to living in New York City mostly. This was originally the Arab immigrant community and has expanded. So one acronym we use is AMEMSA, it's Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian. Regardless of that piece, a lot of them have some connection to an immigrant experience. Either they themselves have immigrated or their parents have immigrated, so they're in a second generation context, or they have family or community constantly coming and visiting them. So I think that's something that is common with a lot of our organizations and globally. I mean, you could look at trends, the world is urbanizing faster, people are moving. I say this all to say that a lot of that, I want to connect kind of the global, and I mean over there. So not global in that as an American context, I think that the rest of the world is global, but anyone in any country looking outside of their circumstance can kind of relate in a way to say that we all go through different kinds of trauma. So whether it's political conflict, working with immigrants who come from Syria or Iraq, or if it's even just domestic policies, exclusion of minority communities or xenophobia, New York City, another great example for this could be stop and frisk. So these are things that make certain people feel like sorts of trauma distressors. I'm not gonna go into a clinical exploration of trauma, but we kind of know what that means. It's something that tends to hold us back if we don't address the healing. And a lot of that is to say that there's the individual and the collective trauma, and a lot of the collective is where settlement houses, I think, draw our strength. So we see community-based healing as kind of something that I think the rest of the international community is getting behind, and for those who approach it with that rhetoric, as we try to do, I think continue to have that resolve, and for those who are thinking about it, to have confidence that NGOs are a context in which you can do this work. And I think the reason it's really important to believe in that vision is because I had a PowerPoint, but we don't have a PowerPoint thing. So there was a few specific text pieces that researchers have done who look at let's say the worst context of what we think is trauma. So global humanitarian crises involving political conflict, gender-based violence, all of this together. People in those contexts, a lot of the time, and this was a cross-cultural study, will not necessarily want to seek clinically based services. There's a lot of narratives or stigma around mental health services in that context in a lot of parts of the world. It's very interesting that instead there's also a big focus on the active rebuilding. So one point that I'm going to impress upon is this idea that we heal through doing. You know, whether it's by asserting ourselves in policy settings, whether it's through just taking leadership roles or providing leadership role opportunities for young people. That's one section specific to youth. It's something that I think is really unique to NGO-based work, and where we can step in to complement healing that is done in more of a traditional clinical setting in a clinical Western model. So, a lot of the things that are in common between settlement, these principles of social justice and community ownership are something that you can see in collective resilience. It's bringing that idea that through social cohesion and relational healing, we're going to come up with some solutions, strengths-based, community support, it's active and issue-focused, and it's an ongoing engagement. So something to say what we do is it's a constant listening, and we try to reflect our community through strategies that we implement. So to get to the end of what I'm going to say, because like I said, I did want to keep it short, there's a few ways that we as a settlement house are fostering this resilience. And resilience is the ability to process trauma, move past it, and actually experience growth. A lot of researchers will say that there's like a space that opens after trauma for innovation that may not have been there prior. So I'm not just saying let's all think about how negative trauma is. it is, as an experience, not something that is pleasant, but there's an opportunity at the end to push into something that may have not been there to begin with. So for one, we create an authentic space for the community. It's gaining that authenticity that I think is really important. A lot of, I think, our programs do a similar thing. So we do that by, implementing culturally sensitive, competent models. This could be a whole other presentation on what that means, but all I mean is it's a dynamic process. It's a lot of listening, it's being invited in, and it's gaining credibility by having staff that speak the languages that mirror the people, for example. We also try to create a safe space with community, so non-judgmental, non-punitive, even when working with youth who come out of schools, for example. Certain school experiences or any other systemic experience may be negative for some young people depending on their story. So we come in, we try to take some of the knowledge we know about certain dialogue styles or discussion styles, but we really try to make it a non-judgmental, safe space. I think that's something that is often, like I said, given that right or that dignity is given to therapists and everything, but really it's in these settings are where you get people who are willing to kind of and need to address this healing to then allow them to build themselves up as leaders in their community. So the authenticity is there, the safe space is there. It's the integrated services, like I said, people after even like a disaster will want to deal with things that talk about food and shelter and civic engagement, and so we're trying to provide a lot of services. At the very end we have pamphlets, you can see the services we provide, but it is about that integrated component. And then, as I said, it's approaching healing in the context of doing, from my final point. A lot of the young people across all our programs have formal or informal leadership roles with younger people. They create these roles a lot of the time. They see a place in even programs that don't necessarily have to do with them, and we don't just invite them to do that, we kind of let them school us, if we may. We also do creative approaches to address trauma. So a lot, something that is on our website, and I'll talk to anyone interested more about it later, is we did a media literacy project. So it was creating films for young people to talk about certain community narratives that came up organically and authentically once they were in that safe space. A lot of the things that they talked about were an intersection of race, class, gender, and political situations in their home country. But they produced these films, and I think, as an observer and someone who has worked with them, that the outcome of those experiences, for example, are something in which they have addressed some of what they had described later as having gone through a lot of trauma, have had a lot, not had the space really otherwise to kind of own that and move past it. So, and now a lot of them are moving into leadership roles in other programs, college readiness, et cetera, but it is really those creative approaches is what I'm trying to emphasize that give young people the opportunity to take those roles. So thank you so much, that's it for me. And if any questions at the end, please feel free to ask. I don't know how much time we have.
Thank you so much, Jamal. We actually saved 1 minute.
Great. This is the most
So we have our last speaker, and that is Rashim.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I work with the Beacon program, which is located on 420 East 12th Street. Ever since I was possibly in high school, actually I was a member first, and this is going to be more of a therapeutic session for me because it's so personal. But I've worked with the Beacon program. I've done my internship since I was 16, became a group leader, and moved up. So being in the Beacon program, where the neighborhood was so violent, was really traumatic for me because there was gang violence, there were fights, constant fights, and I've lost some dear friends of mine. Some friends were incarcerated, unfortunately, and I've also been in and out of foster care system for a while. So the Beacon program has really been a place of support and safety for me. So from a young age, I wanted to change someone's life. Even though I was dealing with so much trauma, I wanted to change someone's life. I wanted to change someone's story. And I never knew that working with the program, I would do so in such a big way. So I began doing this by working with the program, as I said, and I remember one case. I had this girl named Jenna. Jenna was a very energetic person. She didn't have a lot of friends, and your role as a group leader or as a staff is trying to change that person's life. How do I, change that? How do I reach her? So, through the protocol, I had to figure out how to reach her. I talked to her parents, and unfortunately, I found out that she was going through a divorce. Now, I don't know about you, but in many cases in trauma, you wear masks. These masks are used as ways to hide your emotions, to hide your tears, hide whatever the outside, you don't want the outside people to see. So my job was trying to figure out, how do I uncover that mask? And being from a program in which I wore masks all the time, where my friends were unfortunately killed, I had to figure out how to reach her on her level. So I began giving her leadership roles in the program. She became my assistant, so to speak. I implemented jobs, and from that, she really broke out of her shell. She started to gain friends in the program, and she's probably one of the biggest bonds I've ever had. As I said, I was in the program, and I was the first generation to graduate high school. I went off to a prestigious university, and that's pretty much my story. I really changed from the program, and it really inspired me to create change in other places. After I graduated, I also went off to do some marketing. I also tutored. I even worked with autistic adults. And from that, I came back to the program, and I said I really wanted to make my mark here. I really wanted to create change, Jamal said you heal through doing, and I felt that the only way I could heal myself, the only way I could change someone's life was by doing. It's by doing something active. It's by giving back to the community, and I've done so ever since. So I'm really, really very honored to be working with these members who implement change in our community and other places of the world. So I'm very, very proud to be with you guys. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashim. Your story just goes right into my heart. I'm just curious, you work with so many different young people. You have to are you kind of an expert now on seeing and revealing the young people's masks? Or how do you, she was very extrovert and outgoing, but how do you do with someone that is more introvert?
I really had to study a lot. I watched a lot of films, and I studied communication. So I tried to approach her on a level in which that no one else did, because she's been in the program for such a long time, and no one has ever approached her in a way that could, change her attitude. So, as I said, I gave her leadership roles, and I became a friend. And when you're growing up and you're facing a divorce, and she was 12 years old, you're facing a divorce when your identity is basically being crushed. How can you reshape that? And I think me being a friend first, and not so much as a teacher or authority figure, to approach her in that way, I think, was my first step. And it was a good step. She uncovered her mask. She showed everyone who she was. And just how the Beacon program shaped my identity, I believe I helped shape hers.
You met her on a personal, human being level.
Yes.
Yeah. Great job. Wow, how am I going to wrap this up? We have 20 minutes. I'm just going to make a little summary of the speakers. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to listen to you. What I hear is that our organization is providing unique possibilities for people, and create safe spaces for families and youth. And we do advocacy, mentorship, and we provide healing through doing. And if there's no healing, there is no sustainability. Excuse me. We work to change unfair and inequitable social situations, and we work in partnership with our neighbors. That is why some NGOs and neighborhood houses are changing the world. So, thank you. Now, the audience, this is your time. Yes, we have one question already.
Okay, my name is Victor Botebe. I represent Youth Transparency International. I also work with the media, my paid job, print media, Vanguard newspapers. The first question I want to ask, is this deliberate? Because I don't see any African representative on the panel. Now, I think I also need to say this. While I listened to Johan, right? I was just saying to myself, I mean, these guys are really lucky in Sweden. Because back in Africa, back in Nigeria to be precise, it's actually difficult for you to access some of the opportunities that you mentioned. It's a total different ball game. Some of these youth leaders, they're more or less political stooges. They're controlled by big politicians. I had someone say you don't need to really work with politicians, but you can just get empowered. I mean, that's it. The political climate is quite different. So I think it's something that we need to think about and see how we can best work with your organization and other organizations that are represented here. Thank you.
I want to address the gentleman's
Yeah,
question.
I think if you could, this is just a little suggestion, procedural suggestion, to take 3 questions and then open it, take it back, okay? That's just a recommendation.
Well, I don't want to ignore the gentleman's question.
No,
first.
yeah.
He put a
Please,
question
Michelle.
on the floor, and I think
Yeah.
we need to respond to it. I believe the question was, is it deliberate that we don't have someone from an African country? Was that not your question?
Yes, that's the first question.
Okay, and I'm glad you asked that question because it now provides me an opportunity for you to share with us how we can connect further to an African country, because as a board member of IFS, it is extremely important to us, as it has been in many situations, to recruit members in the African continent. We have had a very difficult time in trying to recruit NGOs to be members of IFS, and so I want to talk to you after this to talk about how we can do that, because no, it is not deliberate, but it is certainly one of our goals going forward, and I speak on behalf of the board of IFS to recruit members from Africa. We have not sat silent to the issues or the complexities of what's going on in Africa. I personally have insisted at our board meeting that we begin to address some of those issues, particularly starting with the issue of Nigerian girls, where you may or may not, we have a member in Nigeria, which we wrote in support of from the board and offered any help that we can on behalf of IFS to support some of the challenges faced, particularly in Nigeria. But that doesn't mean that Nigeria is the only country that we would like to engage in and be further supportive. So I ask you to help us recruit for a member in the continent of Africa as we continue our work to change the world, and we do not want to leave out any continent or any important group, such as the individuals and the citizens of Africa.
Thank you, Michelle.
We also have members in Kenya and in South Africa, but I echo what Michelle just said about we would love your contacts with additional NGOs in Africa.
Thank you. We had one question here.
Okay. Hi, my name is Carla. I'm with the All the Palm Peace Foundation. And my question is, I guess it's something the same, but my question is, you guys are based in Ohio, and I wanted to know, and just you, okay?
Yes.
Because I'm okay. In terms of working with the All the Palm Peace Academy, I'm working with child girl education and also school systems to eradicate poverty through, eradicate homelessness and poverty. Okay, and so my question is to not start from scratch. We would like to kind of work with you or see if there's other programs throughout the states that actually have your role model, because it sounds so wonderful. So
Thank
that's,
you.
I think it's really everything.
That's okay. Thank you. We do have a national organization. So just like IFS, there's a national organization called the Alliance for Children and Families, and that is the organization that the Southern Housing and Neighborhood Centers in the United States belong to. And for North America, then provides contact and liaison to the international community, because just as we are experiencing what you talked about, struggling for models to work within the United States context, but also making sure that we can learn from across the world, as we discovered today that there is the idea of urban farming has happened in other countries and is just taken a leap in the United States because of the issues of hunger, but that we can learn globally about those solutions that we can bring to urban communities in the States. But the Alliance for Children and Families is that organization, and I'd be happy to talk to you about membership there to learn about models that can work in the States.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, the gentleman back there.
Hi, my name is Derek Demery. I'm a youth representative here at the conference. I'm also work at the Center for the Study of Genocide and Human Rights on their Sexual and Gender Minorities program. And I'd like to ask any of the panel speakers how they address sexuality with youth. If you look at homeless, the youth population in America, at least 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ queer. I would just like to know how you guys address that.
So this is where I get a little more specific to our work, but I manage an anti-violence program, and we're looking at gender narratives, norms, themes, and I think, I think many of us, and I think you and I at least, could acknowledge that there's a connection between homophobia, misogyny, and a lot of these gender narratives. So I also want to kind of address indirectly the initial question, just to think about, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So what I'm going to tell you is working with a population that has differences from your population. I think it's important to acknowledge difference to some degree, because you gain authenticity and know that you can't say, I understand everything you do. That's kind of a little bit more of the clinical idea. It's been formalized that way of doing any sort of work, but a lot of it is kind of a combination of like spaces that are group work, but that we don't necessarily ask anyone who's coming to terms with sexuality in an environment that may be difficult for them, and a lot of the kids in our communities that we work with who may be going through that, most likely it's going to be difficult for them. So, all sorts of, I really can't go into all the reasons why it may be, and it is unique between each child and their family. I think of individuals, family unit, community unit, global, and there's all of these ways in which we make different decisions from people around us in our units. That being said, we'll work with individuals one-on-one too, and kind of not directly name something that they may not be ready to name, but indirectly provide affirmative messages about the fact that, like, there's a place for them to do this. This is a place where certain values or modes are promoted, or certain counterproductive values or modes are not tolerated. So I don't know if that it's kind of because of the nature of the work we're doing and moving with the population where they're at, we're not really naming it and making that an agenda in and of itself, because I actually see that as being destructive towards starting to build a safe space, but as part of our larger goal of engaging young people to sort of challenge those messages themselves and find solutions that work for them without compromising them. We are talking about sexuality and gender and going there slowly. So I don't know if that was an exact answer of what you wanted, but we're very aware of it because we need to address it and we incorporate it. So
That's the important part.
Yep.
Did anyone else want to?
Yeah, may I just please say something very shortly? I'm being gay and everything. I would like to stress some points, because I think it's really important that you give education for the people who are meeting the young persons. I've all my life I have been excluded by questions, and I think you perhaps know what I mean. And I come to a meeting place, and the man who meet me there says, "Oh, do you have a girlfriend?" No. Then it's time for me to go out, to come out. So it's a lot of giving education, and also to show that this is a place for everyone. It's a place, a venue for anyone, whoever you are. And that is someone has to stand up for that. In the beginning, it has to be us as adults, but soon it will be the young people themselves say, "No, you shouldn't say that, you shouldn't do that."
A lot of the staff that I work with are gay or lesbian, or even in the school that I have my program in. So the exposure there hasn't really been negative. Everything has been pretty much positive, so it's all accepting in my community that I'm in. Part of the Beacon members in the Beacon program, we even go to rallies, even, they actually promote, trying to be positive about it. So I've rarely faced any of that. I have a lot of friends who just part of it, and it's really great. It's a more welcoming area, so.
Great to hear. Do you have a question? Yes.
Hi. Hi,
I'm
I'm
sorry, did someone else?
Yeah, you want the transfer.
Sí, también nosotros tenemos un programa, pero igual la sexualidad no es un problema, más bien el problema es cómo educar, cómo educar para prevenir las enfermedades de transmisión sexual.
We also touch that topic, and the problem for us is not accepting, but how to treat STDs. So it's educational, the challenge we face.
Did anyone else wanted to say something about that question? We wrap it up, so I give it word to you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kushel. I run an organization called YSN that creates employment and entrepreneurship information for young people in over 160 countries. My question is about cross-cultural connectivity of the local groups. Earlier this week I was doing teacher training for teachers in Gaza to teach young people about globally engaging in the workforce because they can't leave their settlements. And then I went home and I went to downtown Los Angeles and taught the inner city kids about what's happening in the Middle East and about how their unique experience living in inner cities and feeling like they're in a prison is so different. It's so similar in so many different ways. And it always fascinates me that our unique experiences in our culture and our feeling of being alone and isolated in the world change dramatically when we find out that we're not alone in the world. And there are other people, especially people of different cultures, who have shared pain and trauma and experiences. And so that was just a fascinating experience to go from the Middle East to the inner city and introduce them to one another and even explain to black children who think Africa is a country that North Africa was Arab and what's happening with the settlements. And so my question is, are there any initiatives to connect the local groups, the actual young people, with the other young people?
It's a great question. Isn't it a great question? So like we're all excited you asked it. Because it gives us a bragging moment about IFS. We do have exchanges because we feel just like you feel it's extremely important. And so we help with exchanges. Unfortunately, we're seeking resources to continue some of those. But you will see our member agencies working with each other to have lots of exchanges. Our last one was Belgium. Did I get that right? Berlin. Had to be right? And so we work for those kind of exchanges because just as in our urban farm, we're talking about water conservation. Well, water conservation for a child in Linden neighborhood doesn't look the same to people who can't get access to fresh water. So there has to be an exchange there, which then creates for us, our young people, an importance on water when they see that what they think is a water challenge is not a water challenge. The fact they can't get a bottle of water is not a water challenge. And so it's perspective and helping them look at their world in a more global perspective than it is just, it's all about me and what I have is so bad and so isolated. And so we do have exchanges with our members and we continue to drive that. Technology we hope will help with some of it because it is an expensive adventure to do exchanges, but we have had successful exchanges with our young people, not just us. And as professionals, we come together every other year to share ideas and meet, but there's also exchanges that happen throughout the year with the young people visiting member agencies.
Do you ever use the Google Hangouts to connect them online?
I'm sorry.
Google Hangouts?
I don't know Google Hangouts. See, this is why I'm not the young person, right?
We did 3 days of training with teachers who were in Gaza, who couldn't travel, who literally had to leave to run home because rockets were falling on them. And we were on video at 3 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles, but we were on video and we were exchanging and we were having the most unbelievable experiences, and now we're connected on Facebook and they're following me here right now. And so you could literally use a tool like Google Hangouts and have the video pop up of these kids in different centers in different parts of the world, and they're communicating.
Yes, so we are Melissa, our executive director, who's in the back of the room just over here, can share with you some of those things that have worked from a technology perspective, and I'm sure anyone else can talk with you. We try to connect through writing. I'm still a little old-fashioned in that because I think that there's some human connectivity that should happen that can't come across the internet. And so we're working on some of those more touch points to really understand and documentation of the exchange versus the internet. It's my experience with St. Stephen's Community House, but Melissa can tell you about some of the other exchanges that have happened throughout our network, because there's a variety of how they happen: in person, face to face, technology, and our small steel pen pal way of connecting.
We did a project between Venezuela and New York City with teddy bears, where groups of young people from each, from community houses in each space agreed, and they sent a teddy bear to the other. And for the entire school year, the American kids took care of the Venezuelan bear, took him home, took pictures, and did a whole pen pal project with the children in Venezuela who were practicing learning English. And so the process of exchanging was also a language access project that the folks in Venezuela wanted to do. So this, and then another thing that we're doing right now is we're creating an album of original music by young people in New York City, in London, and in Paris, using all international digital, like they're making music together using digital tools. So, but we like face-to-face events.
Right. We love face-to-face connecting to people.
But I want to learn more about what you know.
Yeah, I mean, video. They're on video, looking at each other, talking.
Yep.
And it's online.
We can, maybe you can stay after, and we can ask you everything, yeah. Jamal, did you also want to answer?
Sure, really, I mean, a lot of our, as kind of immigrant kids in different stages of what that means to them, they didn't, I think themselves and the kids around the world with globalization are kind of cross-cultural or having a little dialogue internally. So it's interesting because in certain spaces, they are gonna self-identify in certain ways, whether that's for security, preservation, all sorts of things. But we've done, we've tried to do a couple of initiatives using media as well, so sending video postcards. We've worked with the New School and Engaged Media Labs, and actually did something with Gaza, and we had our kids connect to them. I think it's something that's interesting because we've been mainly, other than with the question about minority sexual orientation or LGBTQ, we've been looking at great nation state identities, but we work with Arabs, but there's a lot of difference within that identity in and of itself. So we serve Yemeni, Egyptian, Palestinian, Moroccan, they have differences. So even the postcard with the Palestinians was something that taught them a lot. I mean, so we tried to do stuff within our local community in New York, because New York is a very diverse place. We have a Take on Hate initiative, which is looking at interracial discrimination. I can talk to you more about this later. And system discrimination. The thing I will impress upon you is we really, and like this is, I think, what I love about the settlement house model and about how we implement it. We listen to when kids are ready to do things. Because sometimes they want to get validation and affirmation. You know, at least in an American context, for a lot of these kids, their trauma is post 9/11 discrimination. It's about seeing their religion being abused on the news for all sorts of terrible things. And they need to address that before we tell them, go over here and do it. So it's kind of like checking in. It's finding a fine line, but we are engaging them with young people who are not in their immediate community to get them to look at solutions and narratives that are present or different, but they kind of lead that ship, and we're more facilitating a conversation they're having.
Thank you. One more question.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Emily. What I wanted to ask is what programs, or has anyone been working with incarcerated youth or with those who have been in the system and now they're out of it and they're trying to heal and trying to start over, and basically what are any successful ways of addressing? It's really important, especially with the school pipeline, school to prison pipeline.
I'm sorry, there is, actually, the time is 1. but if we have 1 minute to answer this question. But the ones who needs to go, you need to go, and we totally respect that.
Peter, can I just say something?
Yeah.
Jamal talked a little bit about the Arabic community in New York, and I just want to say that in Sweden we are having almost the same, we're stressing the same difficulties, if you can put it in that way. So I just want to put that, if somebody's interested in about knowing how we work in Sweden too, because it's really common. I know that we had this discussion before, and so you know. So if you want to talk to us about that later, you're welcome to do that. Thank you.
I do want to address the incarcerated youth so that we don't leave your question hanging. It's kind of like Jamal talked about when we were talking about the sexuality. We allow people to come to us and not say, oh, you're part of the former incarcerated group, you're the GO. You all, it's all, and it's you drive, you identify, not question to separate you, because that is not very productive. It is more decisive than anything. And so whether you haven't, that's your story, your journey, we help lead. As I talked about, whatever brighter is for you, that's brighter. We don't define that or define by where you've been or what box you check or all of that. If you have been and there's some sensitivities, we try to make sure we had a capacity within our organizations to deal with whatever those challenges present. But we try not to put people in those boxes and allow that self-identifying, self-determining. You come see us, you come through our doors, we try to meet you with our capacities to serve you and not say this program is for this group who's been incarcerated and this group that's got a G by their name or a L or a Q. It's you, human. And so across the globe, that's what we all are. And so regardless of the rest, as you self-identify and self-determine, we work with you to drive what you see for yourself within the context of your community. So I couldn't tell you out of the 841 students we served, I couldn't tell you which one had been in a juvenile, and I shouldn't. My goal should be about where he or she wants to drive themselves, not where they've been. So we serve 841, I couldn't tell you right now how many were or were not. What's important is where they're going and that we help drive where they want to go.
Yeah, really quick.
Really quick.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't so quick.
Really quick.
Yeah, sure.
For the record, I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing clinical therapy. I just thought maybe that's what it sounded like. I think there's a place for them to work together. I just think a lot of the times people don't focus on community-based healing. So that's all by that.
That was good.
Cool.
So we're wrapping this workshop up, and we will be here for a couple of more minutes and stay around for anyone who wants to stay and ask questions to the panelists. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming and listening to us and being interactive with us, asking questions. Okay, well, I want to give you all a big applause.